Hello, my name is Jim. This is my podcast, The Bloody Vegans. You're very welcome to it. Each week, I'll be travelling ever deeper into the world of veganism, discovering along the way a multitude of viewpoints from the political and ethical to the practical. I'll be doing this through a series of conversations, each aiming to further illuminate my understanding and hopefully yours of all things plant-centric. And this week's no different. I'm going to be speaking with co-authors of the forthcoming The Friendly Vegan CookBook, Toni Okamoto and Michelle Cehn, both of which you may well have heard of. I would not be surprised at all. So let's start with Michelle. Michelle is the founder of the incredibly popular vegan lifestyle website World of Vegan. As I said, co-author of the forthcoming The Friendly Vegan CookBook, co-creator of the Dairy Detox, also an avid and incredible photographer and filmmaker. Michelle's obviously produced hundreds of videos for her own YouTube channel, but also for many organisations that many of you will know and love, including Mercy for Animals and Farm Sanctuary, Vegan Outreach, you name it. Michelle has done an awful lot of work in the vegan community over the years. I'm also incredibly fortunate to be joined by Toni Okamoto, founder of Plant Based on a Budget, the incredibly popular website and meal plan that shows people how to save money whilst eating more plants, ultimately. She's also the author of the Plant Based on a Budget cookbook, as well as the super easy vegan slow cooker cookbook, and is also the co-host alongside Michelle of the Plant Powered People podcast, which I would thoroughly recommend. Toni's more recently been working alongside Michelle on this forthcoming book, the Friendly Vegan CookBook, and I thoroughly recommend it. So to hear a bit more about both Michelle and Toni's story, their journey into veganism, as well as a little bit of an insight, if you like, into just how they went about producing this incredible resource for vegan folks and those transitioning to a more plant-based and ultimately vegan diet. You're going to hear that in this conversation. So without further ado, here's a conversation between me, Michelle, and Toni.
Was very gradual. So over time, since I was 16 years old, I've been cutting out little bits of animal products out of my diet. And it all started because I ran track. And at that point, as a 16-year-old, I had never considered that the food I put in my body would impact how I performed as a runner or how my body performed in general. And I kept getting sick all the time. And my concerned coach thought maybe it was because I was eating Taco Bell every day, that it might not be the best for optimal health. And so I first processed that and I was like, I don't understand you. What do you mean Taco Bell is not awesome for my health? And then from there, I learned a little bit about how red meat was impacting it as well. And so I cut out red meat. I cut out most fast food, or I definitely cut down on fast food, and really began to thrive as a runner. And from there, it just happened little bits over a long period of time. I became vegetarian when I left my family's house at 18, and then I became vegan when I was in a community college veg club when I was 20, and then from there I got really involved in animal activism.
Wow. So yes, this is a very kind of gradual journey. Then I'm really intrigued as to like that beginning stage where you came into it as a result of kind of performance and so on, and definitely like I'd probably concur with your coach that maybe the Taco Bell wasn't the best route. Sounds like you discovered that also. And was there any kind of mention of the word veganism, or did it take right up until that point when you were 20 before you'd kind of heard the word itself?
Well, at that time, the word vegan was just like a nasty word. It was not one that was positively associated with. And so I remember hearing it and remember thinking, oh gosh, I will never, no way, heck no, not for me. And I don't even know when, I guess the big switch happened when I knew people who were normal and regular like me, and they were also interested in transitioning to what I learned was veganism. I had some vegan friends and before that, and I just thought, this is not for me, it's not my lifestyle. But knowing people on a more personal level and knowing they were like me and had similar obstacles and just seemed more relatable helped me cross that bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. There's often a big stigma, isn't there, that surrounds it. And yeah, like you say, when you meet like-minded sort of folks who feel relatively, by whatever definition of normal is for you, then it does sort of help you transition. Michelle, I'd love to sort of get into your kind of journey into the world of veganism. Was it a similar path or markedly different to Toni's?
It was pretty different from Toni's. My path started a long time ago. When I was 8 years old, I kind of made the connection between the meat on my plate and the animals that I loved, and I was a huge animal lover. So at 8 years old, I decided I did not want to eat animals. I didn't want to cause animals to have to die, and I really didn't know any more about the meat or dairy industry or anything beyond. I just didn't want to harm animals. So my mom was like, well, honey, that's called a vegetarian. And so at 8, I became a vegetarian, and I didn't know even another vegetarian, even living in the Bay Area in California, which is, a very progressive area. Still, I never really met other people who were like-minded in that or who were pursuing that path of eating and lifestyle. But I did come across occasionally like a PETA booth where they had information about these topics and things like that. And when I came across that information, I learned about factory farming, and I realized that this was far more than just a personal choice for myself, but this was something that I knew people had no idea about, the horrors of factory farming and how their food was getting to their plate and what exactly was people are eating. And so at that point, I became sort of a little activist. And after that point in school, in every aspect of my life, these topics wove in various ways. In high school, I started an animal rights club, and I would give school-wide talks on all things, not only about food, but also animal testing, animal experimentation. I would, do. Well, it's funny. I would in high school, I would hold fundraisers for nonprofit organizations, because in my head, the only way I could think of to help these huge issues is donating to organizations that were helping animals. But my bake sales and stuff would be not at all vegan. I didn't even know really the word vegan at that point. They would be vegetarian. So in retrospect, I realized I was harming animals while raising money to help them. Fast forward to college, I started an animal rights group in college, the Case Animal Rights and Ethics Society. And at that point, I started connecting with the community, and this was in Cleveland, Ohio, the community at large that was involved in animal issues, and started meeting people who were vegan. And like Toni, once I had at that point heard the word vegan, I thought it was some kind of health trend. I had no idea it was about animals and ethics and things like that. So meeting people who cared about these issues and happened to be vegan and were living, breathing examples that it was positive and a great possible and positive and a way to make an impact in the world made me realize, okay, yeah, I can do this. And I also at the same time picked up a copy of Animal Liberation by Peter Singer at a used bookstore. I loved reading, and I just saw a book about animals that was maybe 99 cents, picked up a copy, read it cover to cover in like a day or two, and it really documents, it's kind of like the book version of watching Earthlings, if those listening know that film. And then it also pulls it all back to ethics and talking about how if we're going to act in a way that aligns with our existing values and morals of compassionate ethics, that eating vegan is the way to go. So I decided, okay, I'm doing this. and there it began.
It's super fascinating going back right to 8 years old, that sort of seed of of inspiration for where you're kind of eventually at now was there so early. I'm intrigued for both of you. There's this sort of element in your journeys of almost that there was some folks who perhaps normalized it for you in your kind of lives. Do you think that kind of the approach that you were shown by some people who kind of normalized veganism and reducing cruelty to animals and harm in our diets and beyond, do you think that those folks kind of informed your personal journey into kind of activism and kind of where you guys are at now from the point of view of the book?
I think that this is something that Michelle and I are constantly processing together, the evolution of our journeys from being a really extremely, incredibly passionate, in-your-face activist to where we are now with being really friendly and approachable and meeting people where they are and understanding the different obstacles people face when deciding to forget everything they've learned about food and reshape how they eat. And so we've learned a lot over time, but I think what's most important for me is to model what I want for veganism and for the future of everyone considering a plant-based diet. And it took me back when I was 20, meeting people who were kind and who looked like me, had similar obstacles. They were also deeply rooted in their cultural food. They didn't have a lot of money because they were in college. It was finding kind of role models to help guide me through the process. And that's what Michelle and I want to do with both all of the work that we do and our book, the Friendly Vegan CookBook.
Yeah, so coming on to the book, was that very much, it sounds like it was, the sort of inspiration for it and indeed the name of it, was that the seed of inspiration for you?
Yeah, absolutely. This approach of being friendly is something that didn't, as Toni was saying, wasn't always a part of at the forefront of our minds as we did various forms of vegan advocacy or just talked to people and went about living our lives. In those beginning days, I think so many people who change over to eating more healthfully, eating more compassionately, and learning about the horrible systems that are in place to produce our food, it just incites this anger, upset, horror that feeds into the way we present ourselves in the world. And in those beginning years of, Toni and I have both been vegan for 13 plus years each. And so in those first years, we just felt like people just need to know this information in any loud, proud, graphic way possible. But we found over the years that we were receiving people were receiving the message a lot more when we weren't even actively putting a message out there. It's like we found that people started coming to us looking for advice, looking for help, having questions, looking for recipes, when we were just leading by positive example and being friendly human beings that happen to be vegan instead of standing out there holding signs and all the things that we've also done. The approach that's worked the best and has been the most warm and has felt so aligned has just been being friendly. And so that has been a big part of the inspiration for our book, tying together amazing, delicious food that we feel like is for everyone and is familiar, comfortable, using normal people ingredients, all of those things, but then also infusing a dose of just complete non-judgmental attitude, warmth. Anyone can pick up this book, even if they're not vegan, and know that this isn't a place where they need to feel any sort of insecurity, but that they can just jump into this fresh, delicious food, feeling like they have friends next to them.
I'd like to add that a big part of it for us has been food sharing. And for me, food sharing is my love language. I want to make food for everyone. And that's kind of how it's been in my culture as well, and was an obstacle for me in the the forefront of my vegan journey. And there's this natural instinct to kind of push everyone away when you're really passionate about helping animals and you want everyone to understand the cruelties that are occurring, and you end up sometimes isolating yourself. And what we found, instead of putting yourself in that position, is that sharing vegan food with your family and introducing them in a kind and loving way to something so important to you, and without having to upfront drop big bombs on them about what's happening in the dairy industry and the egg industry and the meat industry, it can go a long way. Sharing food that's delicious can be received really well, and that's what we wanted for our book, is to make it about sharing food with people who may be hesitant to hearing the vegan message. And that's kind of the gateway to open up a maybe long-term conversation over a very long period of time.
I'm really interested actually in that point, and I love the sort of the ideology behind the book, if you like. The inspiration is incredible, and the book itself is a fantastic resource, as you say, for helping those into the community in this wonderful sort of language of food, as you describe. I'm intrigued at your viewpoint. You know, you folks have been sort of vegan for some time now, have been through that kind of, through a very vocal activist journey, and kind of landed in this place of, okay, this is where we feel like the tried and tested best route in is through this kind of kindness and openness. And I'm intrigued as to whether you have found that has particularly kind of maybe come into more sharper focus in the last few years, since, you know, I look at the vegan community and beyond on social media, and there's a real, you know, there's definitely a sense of polarization, you know, amongst people. There's definitely a desire to draw division rather than to bring together. And do you find that, you know, in light of that this kind of work that you both are doing is actually better received because people are looking for that togetherness, because the world's not sort of presenting it to them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, nobody really wants to be around someone who's a downer all of the time. And so there's that just fact of life. If you're going to be a bummer to all of the people around you, they're probably not even going to want to be around you anymore. They're going to mute you on Facebook. They're going to, you know, it's just, we're in this, you know, self-love period of the world where we're understanding, like, we got to protect our mental space. And if there's negativity constantly around you, like, push that out. Like, I even advocate for people to just turn it off sometimes, because it can be a lot to be around that much negativity. And it is an interesting time where I think we're starting to see so much more friendliness, normalcy. You can see vegans of every different type, you know, it's not just the old hippie vegans. It's not just the animal rights vegans. It's not just, there's no type. The vegan comes in every shape and size. And that is really beautiful.
Absolutely. Michelle and I have had the privilege of being full-time activists since we were very young. And it's really the only job that each of us has had, is to work for animals. And it has brought us to a lot of different mindsets and has introduced us to a lot of different types of activism. And we both feel that really it takes all of the tools in the toolbox to make change. And so we're grateful, however people want to show up, that they just show up and help animals. It takes a lot to dedicate yourself to something and to use your valuable time to fight for others. And so with that said, we feel that we've really honed our message and have seen a lot of success after trying many different methods of activism. We've tried, as Michelle said, standing out with signs and protests and leafleting and animal sanctuary work and everything, and have found that being kind online and being a friend to people who have no vegan acquaintances in their worlds is something that was really needed. And the approach has been well taken. And we get to hear from people every day who are making steps. Some of them are tiny baby steps, like the ones I took when I was 16. And some of them are overnight changes. And we get to be there. And it's such a beautiful gift to be that person for someone and to help someone hopefully make a lifelong change.
100%. I'm absolutely with you on that point as well, that it takes everybody's different style and approach to show up. I think you mentioned that as well, Michelle, that there are so many sort of types of vegan now. There isn't a kind of a stereotype anymore. There is somebody in every kind of interest group, if you like, and I think that's a wonderful thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It's also been fascinating watching, because when we first went vegan, there were so few vegans. It's like every voice was so critical, and literally anything you could do to spread the word, get a news article up. It was just so hard to get this information out there that every tactic was sort of super needed. But now the games have changed a little bit with the internet, with social media, with so many prominent vegan voices rising up, and there being channels for literally everyone and anyone who wants to share a message to use the tools of social media to do so. It's just a completely different world. Information is now widely accessible. There's articles every day, or probably every minute, coming out around the world on these topics, which is great. So it's a great time to sort of be a little bit more cognizant and fine tune our messaging and approach to reflect these times. And the other thing that we've sort of witnessed within the vegan community especially is a lot of times we're thinking of friendliness as friendliness to people who are omnivores, our friends, our families, people who are not vegan, but also among vegans. So within vegans, we've been seeing a lot of judgment, hostility, naysaying. Oh, you're not vegan enough. Oh my gosh, are those boots made from leather? Are you eating honey? Is your sugar, like, just a lot of judgment within the vegan community itself. And that's something that Toni and I are very passionately trying to provide a space of sharing support rather than judgment, and being able to talk about all of these, of course, like sugar and all of these more minutiae issues, but realizing that the way that massive change can happen is happening. The way that we're seeing huge shifts in the world that are going to lead to the world that we want is not through those minutiae issues, and it's not through the nitpicking of the 99% or the 100% or creating some exclusive vegan club. It's really about just sharing delicious food, sharing a lifestyle that is accessible to everyone, that can be normal, that doesn't have to feel extreme, difficult, and like you're going to get kicked out of the club if you take one false move.
And that's something we also embrace, is the imperfection. We have been longtime seasoned vegans, yet we still make mistakes accidentally and on purpose. They are very minor, but we don't want to portray that you have to be perfect 100% to be a vegan. Sometimes mistakes happen and you can just pick up and keep going, and we will pat you on the back and dust you off and send you back on your way, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you did that. You are no longer vegan. And it just, to us, it doesn't make any sense to do the latter. We want more people to go and stay vegan, not to exclude them and shame them and make them not want to associate as vegan.
Completely agreed. Yeah, I think you sort of have to go back to what's the mission we're all on. We're all trying to reduce harm to the planet and to animals, and we're all trying to go on that mission together. And so what is the real purpose in that? Out veganing each other, I'm not sure it's particularly useful or helpful. and also contradictory to the definition of it, the actual word, which I think is often lost within the noise at the moment, But yeah, more power to you for it. I think that there's a point I'd love to pick up on here, and I'd love to get your perspectives on with the when I started to look at the cookbook. There was something that really resonated with me is a couple of things. Firstly, that it was this incredible resource. You start from where do you begin? It really welcomed in people into the community. From prepping your kind of kitchen and your pantry, and what have you got available? Those kind of things. And then just looking through the list of recipes, and there's like a lot of cookbooks, incredible inspiration there, but there's also a degree of comfort and normalcy. Was that, again, something that was super important to you both when coming up with, I guess, whittling down what must be a huge array of recipes that you've both kind of learned over the years?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure to be creating a resource that is what we wish we had when we first went vegan, but also the book that I know I could give a copy to my cousins in Ohio or my vegan naysayer uncle. And if he flipped open a recipe, tried it, maybe it's his first touch of cooking what he thinks of as a vegan meal ever. We want to make sure that those flavors are familiar, that the dish is familiar, that he's not having to go to 6 different grocery stores, that it's not going to be extremely expensive ingredients, that it has nothing there that's going to make him say, ugh, vegan living, this is just not for me. So we took that to heart with every single one of our recipes. All of our recipes, we had over 100 recipe testers of all different sorts. Some were vegan, some were never tried vegan food before that they knew of. Like some were expert chefs, some were brand new in the kitchen. We wanted to create recipes that were as friendly as we are in our just everyday approach, and that were foolproof wins in the kitchen.
Also, for those who are listening and don't know what Ohio is is a state in the United States that is more, it's in the middle of the country, and it's more rural meat and potatoes type of state. Is that right, Michelle? Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah. So my husband's from Ohio, and definitely meat and potatoes, fast food. Most people, I would say, if you were going to very much stereotype, you wouldn't be sitting down and eating like chia seed pudding with exotic fruits on top. Like my husband had never had an avocado or a kiwi or anything like that. So very much meat and potatoes. And then just to circle back on that vision of us creating something that even your naysayer uncle would love, that was my naysayer uncle that was in my head as I was writing this book. All since being vegetarian at age 8 until today, at our holidays, he would tease me or be like, why can't you just make an exception today? Or he just never wanted to try things for the longest time. And he signed up to recipe test for our cookbook. We really wanted people that even would like have that prejudgment about our food. And he came back to me being like, Michelle, this was amazing. I can't even believe it. Like he was blown away and said that he was actually going to start cooking that food, which I was hoping we'd get a, okay, this was okay. Good job. But that we blew him away. It was like, oh, we did it. Toni, we did it.
And for some of the recipes we selected, we did it based on what our own personal families loved. And we included super tried and true family recipes that we've been making, our families have been making for generations. And we just slightly modified them to make them vegan, and wanted to share those with the world as well. And then we also focused on common parties or gatherings where food is the centerpiece. So here we celebrate Thanksgiving. So that was really important to us for the holidays. What would you serve if you're the only vegan and you're cooking for everyone? What is going to make their experience the most perfect Thanksgiving or Christmas, or in Michelle's case, Hanukkah experience? And so that was something that we kept in mind: barbecues, birthdays, holidays, for the recipes in our book.
I'm so pleased you did, because just over the last few weeks, I had a family birthday, and a lot of omnivorous folk were at the sort of the week that we were spending together to celebrate this birthday, and there was it was really nice of them all. To be fair, they'd all agreed to go vegan for the week. So there was this
Wow.
huge, yeah, I know, it was really cool. I was like over the moon that everyone did it, but there was a real pressure on, like, which route do we go down? My wife and I discussed it. We're both vegan. We both were like, which route do we go down? Do we go down the like super healthy, kind of incredibly wholesome, whole food, plant-based diet route? Do we go down the meat substitute route because it feels familiar? And what I kind of love about this cookbook that you both have put so much kind of love and effort into is that you kind of you get both, really. You get the kind of familiarity, you get the comfort, but you get something that feels healthy and nutritious. And it also would have headed off a big debate that happened around price, actually, because we were talking about meat substitutes and how they're great, and the whole family were like, oh, they're fantastic, but we could never go vegan because it's just too expensive. And I think your cookbook just sort of puts that sort of argument to bed a little bit. Was that a really key one for you? Did you want to bust those myths and legends in this cookbook as a sort of primary objective?
Well, my focus is being plant-based on a budget. That's my brand. That's my passion. That's what I've been doing for quite some time now. And that's also something Michelle and I have focused on for quite some time with another project we work on called the Plant-Based on a Budget Meal Plans. But what we wanted to bring to this book was, in addition to price and being price conscious, so we would do things like, instead of using pine nuts in pesto, we would use walnuts instead because that's so much cheaper. But more so, we wanted to figure out, how can we get your family members or friends who give you a hard time to love these recipes? And when you're focusing on a whole foods plant-based diet, or on keeping things as low cost as possible, sometimes you do have to compromise the taste that omnivores specifically are familiar with. And so it's kind of a give and take. And it was something that we put a lot of thought and effort into our book, with the right amount of price consciousness, taste, time, and would your naysaying uncle like this?
Yeah, we took every effort to say, is there a way to make this recipe easier, to cut out a step, to reduce an ingredient, to swap an ingredient for something more affordable? But if it sacrificed taste and flavor and in any way would make it a less palatable dish or a less super delicious dish, we didn't do it. And so I think the pesto example is a really great one, because so the way that we wrote this book is, I created about half the recipes, Toni created about half the recipes, and then they'd go to each other's kitchen. So Toni would send me a recipe, then I would make it, then we'd massage it a little bit, test it as many times as we needed to before it went to the recipe tester. So she made this walnut pesto recipe, sent it to me, and before I even made it, I was like, Toni, this is going to be terrible. I know pine nuts are expensive, but they taste so much better in pesto. That's just what makes the dish. Okay, I'll try it, but I'm not optimistic. And I tried it, and I was blown away. As a pesto lover who has always had, like, I have the memory clearly in my head of pesto made with pine nuts and Parmesan cheese and all of the things. This totally hit it. And never again will I go and buy like $15 of a little handful of pine nuts to put in my pesto, because I realized walnuts, which I don't even like on their own, taste almost indistinguishable in this dish. So it was really cool to find little swaps like that the person eating the dish is not even going to know about. They won't even notice. You don't even have to bring it up. You honestly, you don't even have to say these dishes are vegan. And in most cases, people won't even know or think twice. And that was a big element we wanted to bring to all these recipes as well.
That's an incredible tip, the walnut one. And like you, Michelle, I think when I first hearing that, I'd absolutely be in the camp of, well, I'm not sure that's going to work.
Yep. You got to try it. You got to try it.
But walnuts sounds like definitely like hugely cheaper, but also super healthy for you too. You know, I'm always looking at ways. Got a little boy who's kind of 2 and loves pesto, absolutely loves it. And we often buy shop bought. And I'm always looking for different ways to get various micronutrients into him, and walnuts are just so good for you. Like, it's such a great shout. Talking about like your favorite dishes, the ones that I think, you know, if you were in that situation I was in a couple of weeks ago, the birthday kind of gathering, what would be, and I know it's difficult to sort of nail it down to a couple, but if you were the kind of the showpiece ones that, you know, whether it's the uncle that's a bit skeptical, or in my case it was the sort of the brother-in-law and the sister-in-law who are a bit like, well, I'm not sure about all of this veganism stuff. Which are the ones you'd go with?
Well, I have hosting and sharing food is one of my favorite things. And some of my go-tos include Michelle's fettuccine Alfredo that we both love and I make all the time. And also there's a lasagna soup, which sounds kind of weird, I know, but it's so much better than lasagna. And I'm a soup lover, but Michelle, can you agree? Lasagna soup is better than lasagna?
Yes. I love them both. I make them both all the time. And we have a recipe for traditional lasagna as well as lasagna soup. But Toni and I are such soup lovers that we got to go that route. But not when it's 113 degrees.
Well, speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. Wait, what did I say? That was 43 degrees? Is that 43 degrees Celsius?
I mean, it's unthinkable. I can't get my head around 43 degrees Celsius.
It's very hot here. But I will say, make soup the other day. I made our chicken noodle soup.
Yum. Of course, you made soup on a hot day. But one of the things that we try to do with our recipes also is to hit those different touch points. So like you were saying, when you have family in town who you're not sure how much they'll be into vegan food. I know I have family in town that hates tofu or they think they hate tofu. And as much as I want to be the person that's teaching them to love it, sometimes you just want to find something that you know will meet them where they're at their comfort level and not have to use it as a learning experience for them. So we have dishes like, we have like avocado toast. That's really familiar to people, but we make it really special in a way that's really easy. That'll make them feel like they're in a fancy restaurant at your house. Or we have all these different recipes that don't have any elements in them that would make people go, huh? But then we have a lot of cool ingredients that you might not have used for the first time. And so for those more adventurous friends and family, jackfruit pulled pork with barbecue sauce. They've probably never had jackfruit before, and that's a great sort of discussion starter, it's a fruit that ends up tasting like meat. It's so delicious. So that's a really fun one to make for that. You can kind of do something like a yellow tofu curry, which is something people would just easily order at a restaurant and is very familiar, and that they already think of as vegan food. So we wanted to make sure to include some things that weren't like Tofu Scramble, taking something that they already love and is totally different, but something that's very familiar from the get-go.
Yeah. Talking of things like Tofu Scramble, because I'm a huge fan of Tofu Scramble, and I would not say I've perfected it, and I can't wait to get stuck into your recipe so that I can do exactly that, perfect it, because I always seem to get it slightly wrong. But I'm determined to get it right, because when I've had it from people who are better chefs than me, it's always amazing. But it's definitely one of those that I'm always a bit concerned about almost giving to an omnivorous friend or family member, because I'm like, well, they've got a comparison point. Whereas, like you say, with something like avocado toast, their expectation is it's kind of going to be vegan. So you anywhere upwards from there, you make it special, and it feels very, very different. But it's interesting that you've included the likes of the tofu scrambles, the mac and cheese. I think there's a tofu bacon in there. Some of those ones that they feel like there's a bit of pressure on those for you. Did it take a while to kind of get those recipes exactly right, where you felt comfortable enough to put them in front of somebody who's got a real comparison point?
Yes. Oh my gosh, those are the ones that we really wanted to perfect because, I mean, take Tofu Scramble. I have a few recipes for Tofu Scramble on World of Vegan. Tony's got recipes on Plant-Based on a Budget. There's infinity recipes online. But like you, I have made it so many times, and sometimes it comes out great. And sometimes I don't even know what I did differently because I usually just eyeball it and throw in spices. And sometimes I'm like, this really wasn't as good as the last time. What did I do wrong? So we wanted to create something that if you aren't to the point where you can just blindfolded make yourself a tofu scramble, which we hope you get to at some point, that you can follow this recipe and get it. And we have some things that we integrated in this that I had never tried before in a tofu scramble, and now it's like my go-to. And one of them is adding nutritional yeast, which is a staple in every vegan home, but anyone who's not vegan is probably new to that ingredient. So there were a few ingredients that we talk about in this book that we wanted to help acclimate people to. And one of those is nooch.
There's a special trick. You have to first melt vegan butter into your tofu scramble and then coat the butter with the nutritional yeast. So it's more creamy. It's like this creamy cheesiness. That's really good.
Well, there's a top tip. I definitely didn't have that in mind. I've never done that before.
But you'll notice that we didn't include one recipe that we really thought we were going to, but we just couldn't get it right. It's the chocolate chip cookies. And we at some point decided that if it wasn't absolutely perfect, we were just going to skip it. And we also used that mindset to bring on some of our favorite chefs who have perfected recipes. So Chef Chloe Coscarelli gave us a recipe to use of her spinach dip. Our friend Colleen Patrick Goudreau let us use her pizza dough. So they had already put so much time and effort into perfecting these recipes, and we knew that we couldn't get it better. So we brought them on to highlight their food as well.
And I actually did try, I really wanted to include a spinach artichoke dip in our cookbook, and I hadn't even thought it because I have made Chloe's from her book, Chloe's Kitchen, over the years dozens of times and loved it. So I kept trying sort of different versions to create my perfect spinach artichoke dip. And I kept thinking, this is good, but it's not as good as Chloe's. And so when we were really intentional about when we did include guest recipes, pulling the ones that we have used in our lives for a long time and just have been such staples that in order to present a book of our favorite recipes, they couldn't not be included. It's like we had to be able to share those too. And so, yeah, it is such an honor to be able to include those as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Yeah, there's some excellent ones in there. I'd love to go back a little bit because I'm still intrigued. I haven't really got over the lasagna soup bit, and I'd just love to know a little bit more about how does that work? Because I'm a huge lasagna fan. So I'd just like to sort of, how does it work? I'll let you guys explain rather than me try and ask an awkward question about it.
Michelle, it's your masterpiece, so I'll let you go.
Okay, so the concept of lasagna soup is you're basically creating a soup broth that you add tomato sauce to or pasta sauce to that you would usually use in a lasagna. So it becomes like a chunky tomato-based soup with some veggies and whatnot and onions and garlic. And then you take actual lasagna noodles and you just break them up in your hands into little tiny pieces. So you have these little lasagna-looking noodly chunks that cook in the same pot. So it's actually like a one-pot dish of lasagna soup. And then when it's done, you spoon it up and you've got delicious soup with noodles in it.
But one of the favorite parts of mine that you forgot to mention was the tofu ricotta that's in there. It's like a crumbled tofu that gives you a cheesy texture. And that's one of my favorite parts of the whole soup.
Yeah, and this is a recipe that my birth father, who I connected with a couple years ago, ended up going vegan a few months after we met. And he was very health-minded. He wanted to do it for his health. So he started integrating, what can I eat for breakfast now that I don't have eggs? So he started using Tofu Scramble. And then we would get on calls every week and cook together. because we didn't live close enough to be hanging out. And one of the things that we cooked again and again and again was lasagna soup. And it's the type of thing that if you've never made it, it's like, how does this work? But then once you make it, it's so good. And he would do fun things like he would always crumble tofu into anything, soups, stir fries, rice, whatever dishes he was making, just crumbled tofu. And he was just like, all right, added protein, more nutrients, whatever. Great. And then so he'd add that to the dish. But then also if you want to bump it up, or if you do love like vegan meats, you could take vegan sausages. Sometimes I'll take like tofurkey, Italian sausages, and slice them up and put them in the lasagna noodle soup. So we don't have that in our book calling for that because you absolutely don't need it. But if you want that added meatiness, you can always add those to most of these dishes.
Yeah, I love that Italian tofurkey sausage thing. And my little boy does as well. It's fantastic. I think we'll be making lasagna soup and adding a bit of that to it as well.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know if you make anything. That'll be very cool.
I definitely will. I'm determined to get this tofu scramble perfected. So that'll be first on the list, and then I think we'll be cooking the lasagna soup together, definitely.
Well, and I'm so excited to hear about what your son loves, because I have a 6.5 month old son right now, and he's just starting to try food, like little bits of single ingredient food. And I'm so excited to be to the point where he can try the meals that I'm making and eat what we're eating. And it definitely, like you're saying, it inspires me to figure out how to make all of my meals as healthful as possible, to lead by a positive example.
It's an absolute joy getting him to this stage, and he's at nursery now, so he's interacting with lots of other kids, and he's in his own little way, he's already a little activist. He talks about tofu and things like that, and you can see other kids like looking at him like, "What are you talking about?" But and what's lovely is that they do a bit of cooking at the nursery, and they've basically decided, because he's like the only vegan kid there, but they've decided it's far easier to just cook a lot of vegan stuff when they're baking, just because everyone can eat it, as opposed to them having to make like 5 or 6 different versions, because there's someone who's lactose intolerant and someone who's, and obviously Arthur, my little boy's vegan. So he's his own little activist. So I'm sure he'll join me in in enjoying some of the recipes soon, no doubt.
Yes, little tiny future friendly vegans, actually current friendly vegans. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to get into the tofu, and then the kind of the substitute meat kind of discussion. And I will start with the tofu bit, because I noticed that you guys had selected tofu in the kind of the 5-star kind of ingredients, if you like, the 5 superstar vegan ingredients, and it's definitely one of those that I think there's almost a bit of skepticism, perhaps even a bit of a hangover from many of my omnivorous kind of friends, from their recollections of vegan dishes from a while back, and tofu being a kind of a slightly wet, slightly dull substance. But you've both used it to incredible effect in this book, and I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you came up with those 5 ingredients, and how kind of critical tofu was to you in the decision making process there.
I just like to say that I totally understand your friends, because I was a big time tofu hater. I thought, this is so bland, I would never cook this on my own. And it wasn't until I really learned how to properly use tofu and understood that it's like a raw piece of meat. You have to flavor it. You have to cook it in a certain way to get it to be good. Once I made that connection as someone who was eating meat at one point and knew how to sort of prepare meat, it just made so much more sense, because I think people expect tofu to be just this great thing right off the bat, and when they are disappointed when they bite into this plain white tofu, they write it off, and it's really so versatile.
Yeah, and it's also something that we get questions about all the time, and not just from people who are stepping into vegan living, but like my neighbor would ask me all the time, Michelle, can you please give me some tofu recipes? It was just something that people realize as a healthier protein option compared to animal proteins that you can easily incorporate into main parts of your meal. And so there's a lot of things relating to how to cook tofu that took me a long time to learn. And so those tips are so important, like how to press your tofu, all the different types of tofu are out there. There's so much, even when you're sauteing tofu, to not be swishing it around all the time. I would constantly move my tofu on the pan, and it made it so it never really crisped up and browned at all. And so it would just end up being sort of soggy tofu. And so those tips are so simple. And once you learn them, you can apply them to all of your cooking going forward. And yeah, tofu is one of those beautiful things that no one goes into the gate being like, I love it. But pretty much everyone who gives it a solid chance comes out of the gate being like, I love it.
It's just a blank canvas, isn't it? I think, like, to your point, Toni, like when you have like raw meat, like I've said this to my omnivorous friends who are a bit skeptical before. It's like if I just gave you some raw meat, you wouldn't like it. It's the flavoring, the seasoning, the cooking that does the work. And you just taught me something there, Michelle, with the not shaking it around in the pan, because I've always done that primarily because I thought that was what chefs did. It looked aesthetically pleasing to move it around, but I've learned something there valuable, so thank you. So it'd be good to kind of just explore a little bit with you guys a subject that I've talked about with a few folks, and I'd just love to get your perspective on, which is the sort of the continual rise of meat substitutes, and I think there's a lot of, I think they do a fantastic job in terms of helping people transition into veganism, and do a great job at almost providing a treat now and then, and so on and so forth. But it's really interesting to me. You've not necessarily put a ton of them in the book, and I've had lots of conversations with people where they kind of actually, within the vegan community, have a bit of a concern almost that as societies kind of look to monetize veganism, that we've got all these meat substitutes and they're not necessarily going to capture all of the health benefits of a fully kind of whole foods, plant-based diet. I'd love to get your perspectives on where they sit within a well-balanced, well-planned vegan diet.
Well, in our cookbook, we have some as optional ingredients, but we didn't include any commercial products that are specifically for vegan cheese and meat into our recipes. And that's because they're not always super accessible in a lot of places here, especially in rural areas. And so we wanted to be conscious of that. But as far as having a well-balanced diet, I feel like it's something that I still struggle with, and I've been vegan for so long. Sometimes it's so convenient to microwave something when you're having a busy day at work, especially now that we're all working from home, and sometimes people have their kids at home and their spouse and their dog is barking, and you just want to get the quickest meal as possible. In those cases, we recommend trying to batch cook, so using some of the recipes like curry in our cookbook, or even going back to the staples and making a big batch of quinoa and a big batch of beans and keeping tortillas on hand. That's something Michelle and I really rely on, is throwing burritos together, or a quick stir fry with frozen veggies and rice that we whipped up in the Instant Pot. It takes some effort to be conscious of what we're eating and how it is fueling our minds and our bodies, but it's worth the effort. And I am grateful for all of the plant-based products on the market. I think that they're so incredibly helpful. And if we want people to not rely on animal agriculture as much, that is a great start to have alternatives for people who really love their meat.
Yeah, it's like when you look at, in America, we call it the standard American diet. Do you call it that there too? Because it really, junk food, I feel like, originated in America.
Yeah, we don't we're aware of the term standard American diet, but we have our own version of terrible diet that we call standard. So, yeah,
okay, so when you're coming from the standard, I'll say meat and dairy based diet, of course, choosing a fully whole foods, plant based, from the earth, picked from your garden, organic, everything is the pinnacle of healthy. But that doesn't mean you can't be healthy while integrating other foods into your diet as well. And certainly when you're coming from the standard meat and dairy diet and swapping out to plant-based meats instead of animal-based meats, that generally comes with vast improvements in healthfulness in a lot of different ways, especially when you're taking other steps as well and incorporating many more plant-based foods and vegetables and fruits and whole foods and smoothies and all those things along with it. So I think it's so important to have those, of course, as a transition food, but also I've been vegan 13 years and I still enjoy a good veggie burger. I still go and try the new cool things coming out on the market, and I feel good. I feel healthy. I don't feel like each food, I don't feel the need to be extremely critical of the perfecting the nutrition content of every single food that I put in my body. If that's what you enjoy, more power to you. But I think there can be some balance, and just, leaning towards whole foods whenever you can is great.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, and I'm definitely in the space where I try all of the new stuff and really enjoy it as well. But I have noticed it being a debate within certain corners of the vegan community at the moment, and it's fascinating hearing your perspective, and I'm kind of with you, across the broad strokes of those arguments that it's definitely has a place. And definitely in our kind of busy lives and our convenient world that we live in, but there's also, and I love that point that you mentioned there, Toni, and this is definitely something I need to get better at, but is the batch cooking and the kind of early preparation kind of does help you avoid, I think, some of the pitfalls of any diet, of convenience, which sometimes doesn't necessarily always marry up to health. But if you can batch cook and get ahead of things, it's definitely helpful. Also, love that point around having some staples to go to that are quick and easy and healthy. I think that's really important for any family as well, definitely.
And they're not only quick and healthy, especially if you do have tools like a rice cooker or a slow cooker or an Instant Pot. Sorry.
Hi, Eddie.
My dog is asleep and he's dreaming right now, and so he's
really?
He's barking in his sleep. I'm so sorry.
I like it. He's just joining in the conversation. It's great.
Sorry. He'll stop any second.
No, it's fine.
He's like, I really like snacks too.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I was trying to say is that in addition to being healthy and fast, especially with tools like Instant Pot or or any pressure cooker or slow cooker or rice cooker, having whole grains and beans is the cheapest way you can be eating. It's so inexpensive to load up on your staples, especially in bulk, and yeah, that's how I save money all the time.
Yeah, totally with you. Some of those staples are absolutely cheap, dead easy to get hold of, and make some delicious food too. So yeah, totally with you on that one. I've got one final sort of big question for you both, which I ask many people who come on the podcast, which is, how confident do you feel in our kind of all of our kind of collective eventual goal of transitioning to a vegan society? A big question, but I'd love your perspectives on it.
I feel, I'm generally a pretty optimistic person and I love to dream. So I definitely see that as my dream world. And I hope to live to see the day where that happens. But I'm also a realist, and I think there's a good chance we'll get there, but I'm not sure if we'll see it in my lifetime. Although looking at today, I never would have believed we'd be where we are today just 10 years ago. This blows my mind. I mean, honestly, every month when a new fast food chain that brings on a vegan burger or whatever for the first time, or new products are invented, or there's now suddenly eggs made from plants that you can just toss in your, like, everything is available, and just knowledge is spreading so fast. It does make me feel very optimistic and hopeful.
I, like Michelle, have all of the hopes and dreams that it happens, but I surround myself with mostly people who are not vegetarians, and I think that sooner we'll have a society that eats less meat and less animal products in general, and I'm grateful for that too.
I think I'm with you both, actually, that I'm not sure. There's definitely a part of me, a pragmatist side of me, that says, well, maybe I won't necessarily see it, but I definitely choose to be on the optimistic side of the fence. And definitely I think we'll definitely move to, I think, some significant reduction. I think that's probably the journey we're on. Well, at least I hope so. But very, very interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, it's been actually really interesting as we've been sharing our book. I've seen a huge change from, I mean, Toni and I have been doing this work for a long, long time. And over the years, we've shared various cookbooks and ebooks and whatever that we've created or that other people have created. And this is the first time in my history as a human on this earth that I've shared something and I've heard from my mom's friend who's not vegan but knows someone who's vegan and is eager to start cooking some meals for her, or someone I've known since second grade and is like, I feel like now's the time to start trying to eat more plant-based. And I just, the people from the very outskirts of my life or that I didn't know and who were not plant-based themselves or vegan themselves, it's like now we're to a point where everyone knows someone who's vegan. Everyone knows what the word is. People didn't even used to know what the word vegan was. It's
Vegan.
just vegan. And so it's really so encouraging. And I do feel this sudden difference right now, like we are at this other form of tipping point, taking us somewhere that is far beyond where we are right now, which is exciting.
I hope, I really do hope so, and I think I like you, I can definitely see friends, family, that that person that you bumped into, somebody you work with, those kind of things. The questions that you get asked are definitely different. And that's only in the 3 and a bit years since I've been vegan. There's definitely a shift even in that time period. So I can imagine over the decade, it's even more marked. Absolutely. And, we'll see where we go from here. But certainly with books like yours, I think we're definitely going to have some fantastic resources to help people along the way. So a huge thank you to you both for coming up with this amazing resource for us all. And on that note, where would we go about getting hold of a copy of the Friendly Vegan Cookbook?
You can go to friendlyvegancookbook.com, or you can go to wherever you buy books.
Super. And is it available across the world? Can we pick it up in the UK too?
Yes, you can get it in all English-speaking countries.
Excellent. Well, I thoroughly recommend it. Having got a copy myself, it is an amazing resource, whether you're new, transitioning to veganism, never thought about it before, or in fact are dyed-in-the-wool vegan. I think you'll definitely get some benefit from it. So again, huge thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on. It's great to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Toni and Michelle. It's been great chatting with you.
Talk to you soon.